Well, hello, Sandy.
Amy, people can't see the visual, but you got to say it.
Kansas City won the Super Bowl.
Yay.
Yay! That's so awesome. Very exciting. I will just say I'm doing a lot of celebrating, did a lot of celebrating last night, this morning. And yes, it's just and ready for the parade on Wednesday. So
And you are in Kansas City right now, correct?
I am in Kansas City. I know it's been a whirlwind of not knowing where I was going to be for the Super Bowl, but yes, it was good.
And one
So
thing well, before we jump in, so one thing you'll always remember. So when we moved to Durango, it's always equated. And I always say to everyone, well, when did you move to Durango? It's like, oh, 6 weeks before COVID hit.
oh
Well, you
yeah.
could say the 10 years from now, it was when they won the 2023 Super Bowl. We had
Right.
moved, months
Yeah.
before that.
Yeah. We were here. It was fun because, the apartments everywhere, you can see courtyard and you could just see all the TVs going and you could see people, you could hear people stomping. And it was like, I'm like, okay, this is actually pretty fun. So
That is
we were having a
way
good time.
fun.
It was good. All right. So I want to tell you a little bit what I was doing because I didn't know where we were going to be for the Super Bowl. It was because my son graduated from Navy boot camp. And then, so we got to go up there on Friday. And I'm sharing that because today we're talking about the messy middle. And his story is a little bit like the messy middle because we got to see him in the after because we always know the before of the
Right.
story a lot of times and then we know the end, but sometimes we don't see the messy middle. And with a project or with a business, and I'm thinking of my son going through boot camp was probably the messy middle for him.
Right.
Like it was not fun. He had to like do a lot of things endurance wise and that he didn't want to do, but he was really happy in the after. So I was thinking of this when I posted on social media. Here I am posting these great pictures and this huge smile. That's the after.
Right.
And we know the before, but a lot of people didn't acknowledge the messy middle.
And I think the messy middle makes it even more of a celebration for him because only the people that roll up their sleeves and do the middle have that full appreciation of the joy in the end. Even though we're all joyful
Right.
for Trevor, and I saw the picture. I'm like, oh, great, because I knew it was happening. So I was looking. I was on the lookout, and I got a double. Then I got to see, Tom, and I'm catching here and there. And yeah, we all have the joy in the end, but it's the elation in the beginning of an idea, the excitement of what's to come. But the tough, non-glamorous part is the messy middle. But you have to go through the
Right.
messy middle to get the glory in the end.
Right. And so, yes, and this can be it, I think about when I work with clients, I always tell them it's going to get worse before it gets better because you have to pull everything apart and then you put it back together the way it'll work better. Um, so it's projects, it's businesses. A lot of people celebrate these startups and it's not like a startup just happened and woo, they were like in the garage one day and the next day they were a booming business. There's a messy middle to get there, and that's where a lot of having that the endurance and the perseverance to get through the messy middle, I think is what we want to talk about today. And how can you harness that positive and yeah, how can you keep going in the messy
I think
middle? I
I
think
think
that's the hardest one.
there's a realism to that too, because the messy middle is easiest to navigate when, well, I shouldn't say easiest. It's easiest to navigate if you're either when you have control over the perceptions and everybody's rowing in the right direction. And when it's just yourself, it's always motivating to have other people helping you out, but you really are motivating yourself, right? Because I have
Right.
different examples and things that came to mind to me of leaders that were not realistic about the messy middle, which really led to an impossible outcome because the messy middle is not going to disappear. You can plan it, but it's just the making it completely, the messy part completely disappear, and to go from concept back to the startup to something wonderful is going to have some level of a messy middle that needs realism and
Right.
endurance.
Yes. So do you have an example of a messy middle that somebody gave up on in the messy middle?
Oh, I
I,
have lots of examples of that, and I'll pick on a son that I won't name, but I have one that is full of ideas, and he wants
Mhm.
to do startups, and he wants to do this, and he was onto the AI and the chat GPT before we even knew it was, but he will start things and he'll be so excited and he'll have this whole plan, and then when he gets to the messy middle, he stops because it's a lot of work to set up the tax ID number and get the people on board and get the website to work. And how do you pace it? All that stuff to make it to go to fruition. And I use that example because I think I'm picking on him because it's easy, because I know he started all these different ideas. And
yeah.
but then there are a lot of entrepreneurs that start that way because they know the middle is going to be messy. So they think through all their ideas and then they pick one to go with, analyzing what it's going to take to get to the end, right? But it's
Right.
ones that if you keep starting things and if you never finish them, a great idea is nothing until you've started it and made it viable. An idea is
Right.
just an idea until you have action.
Yeah, completely. Yeah. Um, I remember I took a class one time on working with creatives, and creative people have these inspirations. It's like these ups and downs of energy,
Mhm.
and they get a great idea and they get the adrenaline going, and then they start executing, and then it starts getting boring and messy and no fun. And so they like the process of creating, and so they keep creating, and they never finish the things that they started. And that's a little bit like creating all these messy middles and not like going through the discomfort of finishing it. Like that's, and then you get to feel that accomplishment of actually finishing it.
I mean, creativity does need some structure just to get to out to people for them to enjoy it. And the example that came to mind directly to me that hit home was writing. And whenever I've had a consistency and a plan with my writing, I publish and it gets done, it gets moved forward. Well, I can give you excuses. I was caught up in other things. I knew there was a messy middle to it, but because of that, all of a sudden I blinked. I'm like, it's been a year since I've really posted new content. And the messy middle for me, and it wasn't fun, was really to kind of set up a schedule, make sure all those things, even before I took this pool of creative ideas, because I literally have 20 stories in draft that were exciting, and oh my gosh, this has a great theme to it, I have a great story, and I do some kind of a rough draft and they all sit there on my desktop. And the messy middle for me was making sure my website was up and taking the blogs, all the little plugins that go with it. And then even with those drafts, the drafts are kind of the fun, exciting. When you talk about the creativity up here, that part, it's the editing, Amy. It's the double checks. It's get a second set of eyes, getting it down to a certain number of words. That's not as much fun to go read the same thing over and over and over again, but that's how you get to the fine-tuned final product. For me to take my creative side and have it go out to the world, for me, what works the best is to have a schedule, just like we do with the podcast. I have a list of here are the 12 things, here are the dates, and it's kind of fun sometimes, the stuff in between. But what's really fun is when we research and talk about the content. But the messy middle, there's nothing glamorous about it. But I couldn't
Yeah.
have the output if I didn't have the messy middle for the creative endeavors.
Right. So I was doing a little research on this because I'm a geek, and I like to do research.
You're, you're,
Um,
you're a wonderful geek.
I like to dig into stuff. Um, there is actually a book called The Messy Middle,
Mhm.
and I did not know that. And I found it, it's by Scott Belsky,
Mhm.
who did a startup, and he talks about going through it. But one of the things that he talks about, and I wanted to kind of tap into you on this because I was trying to come up with an example on this and I couldn't. But one of the lessons that he says, if you want to last through the hard middle of your journey, remain self aware through trials and triumphs. Because he says, when you go through a great time in the middle, we let our ego take charge. This hinders our ability to make decisions effectively because our psyche makes us overconfident. We ignore advice. We think we have it made and that we don't need to improve anything. And I thought that was interesting because I've always thought, the messy middle is the hard part, but sometimes in the middle are these triumphs, and then
Are
like
over.
I'm trying to come up with an example of what that would be, like a triumph in the middle that maybe so you don't end up finishing, or maybe
Okay.
you don't finish well because you're not listening to advice. I don't.
So an
I'm
example I
thinking.
give the go ahead.
Well, I was thinking of like agile type of project management where you're constantly getting feedback and adjusting so that at the end you have the product you want. Maybe that's like ignoring the feedback. I don't know. What's your example?
Well, or over the messy middle, there's just a lot of steps to it. And so by having too much, what I heard him say in that, and I might be wrong, is if you're just, if you're getting too excited about the victories that you're underscoring the other pieces and bits, part of the messy middle is they all have to work together and be done to get to the final product, like with agile, or with
Yeah.
lean.
Yeah.
I'm just picture the board that has 50 different sticky notes and different lines. And so let's say you got one line done. It's wonderful to have that victory to say, we got this done. This was the most important one. All those other little details still have to happen. And if they don't, no matter how victorious even the hardest one was, it's still not going to get to the end. And the example I give to you, because I've worked in healthcare and I worked in a huge startup that was healthcare related. So if you looked at, okay, we're going to bring in, we need to recruit 20 doctors. Hard thing, right? They got to sign up. They got to think about all the things that go with that. So there might be this long line because I've got to sign them up, that we've got to have legal contracts. There's all the meetings to get there. Everyone has different interests on, what it's going to take. So we might have that line with all those things to get those doctors, and we can be jubilant saying, we did it. They're all signed. We're here. We're ready to go. But if we're not contracted with the insurance companies, which is really kind of boring, and you think in your head, well, that's easy enough. Well, guess what? It actually isn't. There's timeframes, there's credentialing, there's negotiating, there's all kinds of things that you think you've got it in this example because you've done the shiny nickel thing of having this team, and it's even jubilant because you're high-fiving. Well, none of them are going to be that involved in the less sexy thing of credentialing, but there is nothing that was promised or can happen until there's insurance contracts, right? So that's kind of a big example, but I lived not that exact same story, but very similar, where we had everybody signed. It's like having the dream team for a movie. You can have all the actors and all the contracts and all the press,
Right.
but the devil's in the detail, right? And maybe that's part of this too, is that the messy middle is the devil's in the detail.
Yeah, I think that's very well put because you're right. If you ignore all those little details, then you're ignoring the messy and you're not going to get to the final product where it's a good product.
And I used a huge example for that one, but it works all the way down. For instance, I'll use the example, I'm right in the middle of it right now, is moving my workshop shop content to Kajabi, which is a teaching platform. And they did a great job of having a 6-week creator challenge where we got all kinds of coaching, and they gave us all the tools. But at the end of the day, we have to be the ones to take our creative content and put it on the platform. There's a lot of details that go. The messy middle in that is, how do I capture payments? How do I integrate with my website? How do I get my forms out there? How do I, there's just, I could go on with 50, that no matter how well they spell it out to us, show us how to do it, at the end of the day, me hiring someone needs to get that done. And
Right.
that's not sexy. And that's, that's the devil's in the details, because if people can't access the class, and if they can't pay me, there is no business model, right?
Right. You've
But
created this class. If you did, then you had this great idea and you got it, but you got to have all the steps to get people to like sign up. And
how many of the people signed up for that 6-week creator challenge thinking, perfect, I'm going to sign up for this, and when I'm done, I will have my product.
right.
But I did not read this book. I read snippets and like the 4-minute summary, but really what he's trying to project, what I got out of it is, if you want success, you have to realize there's a messy middle. You have to have a strategy for getting through it. You have to know it's there, and don't get too high over the highs or too low over the lows. You just got to push through and get it all done.
Right. Yeah. Very true. I was thinking about that. We had some friends who came in yesterday to watch the game with us and stuff, and that we haven't seen them since we moved. And so I saw her prior to moving, and we were selling the house and all that, and then now we're settled. And she was like, "Oh, you like it, it looks like it went really good," and I was like, well, yeah, you see it, you're seeing the after. Like it was a mess. There was like, disruption. There was this flexibility, having to have flexibility in our schedule, not knowing some things, not having answers to things. There's just been a lot in between that and now. And she wasn't, being dismissive by any means. She was just saying, like, wow, you're settled. This is great. But I was like, yeah, there was a big messy middle in between where you saw me last and now you see me here.
Okay, health, messy middle. And I do want to go back to Trevor too, but health. So running with my friends that are generally older than me, with us all being older, we got into a conversation about how people, I thought it was just me. I had somebody comment to me, wow, you're just lucky you like to work out. Like it magically just happened. And so our messy middle was, one lady talked about how she had huge pelvic surgery, and she went from being an aerobics instructor, this was 20 years ago, to, barely being able to walk for, a quarter of a mile, and how she had to rebuild it up. And even as we get older, or as things happen and our, we have to build our health back up again. And that messy middle is all planning out, making sure we have time to exercise, what the level of exercise is, what we're eating, all those things that go to the product of being fit or being at a fitness level that we want to be. It doesn't, like your home, it doesn't miraculously end up that way. And again, in people's defense, they see the end. And when they don't see the messy middle, they are simplifying what it took to get there.
Right.
So back to health, how many people think, oh, I want to have what she's having or what he's having, and they buy the bike, they get the gear, and they try it for a week, and they're like, this is a lot of work. And sometimes it rains, and sometimes it's really windy, and I'm not quite sure how to use the gear, and I don't like what I bought, and I don't have time to do it. Like, we can give the whole list of how you're not going to deal with the messy middle, but there's a whole messy middle to that part of life too.
Yes. Yes, I was just reading a book. I love that example about health, because I was thinking about that too. You see the before and afters of weight loss, and like there's a whole path, a journey in between those before and afters that you don't know what they had to go through to get there. And you got to acknowledge that middle and celebrate their achievement, but you have to know that it wasn't easy. I was just
Actually,
yeah, go ahead.
just we're going to Patagonia for a 2-week hiking trip, and the website, one thing we all noticed, we're going with another couple, is when we're doing some of the research, getting close to it, disclaimer that keeps coming up on the website: do not go on this trip to lose weight. Go on this trip if you're already at a fitness level to handle it. If this is all over their website, Amy, there
Right.
must be a lot of people that say, gee, I need to be fit. I think I'm going to book a 2-week hiking to Patagonia. I mean, it must be a frequent thing. Why else would that be all over their website? But
Right.
back, I want to be like them. You don't just sign up for a trip.
Right.
Do hiking for 2 weeks and 17-mile hikes on a day to get that outcome. There's definitely a messy middle, and there was no thought process of a messy middle for somebody signing up for weight loss for a hiking trip in Patagonia.
Right. I'm sure a friend got back and said, "Oh my gosh, it was a great trip and I lost 10 pounds."
I'm the most fit I've been in a long
"Oh
time.
gosh, I'm gonna sign up."
I say, go on with your story. I had to throw that in.
Oh, that's good. I love that. No, I was thinking about a book I was reading. It was called If You Tell, and it was about children that were abused. It was based on a true story of this family and these children abused. But it started at the end, and it started with these 3 grown women who are successful. They have families of their own, um, and then it shared their story. And I thought about it. I was like, if somebody would have just met one of these women, they never would have known what they had been through and what their messy middle was to get to where they are now. And so part of me was thinking, we all have messy middles. Like, there's no matter what is happening in our lives, good, bad, whatever, there are messy middles that everybody's going through somewhere, somehow, or they've been through, and not making assumptions that their road was easy, like their path was easy. Um, some paths are easier than others, some are harder than others. But I think you have to like know that everybody has to go through those messy middles, and hopefully they're not that abusive family. It was really sad, but those women, they did a lot to get to where they are now. So, but anyway, that was kind of my thought when I was reading the book. You can tell everything I read. The Super Bowl, they were doing adversity at the very beginning of the Super Bowl. I don't know if you saw that about the adversity the players had been through. And I'm like, oh, look, that's their messy middle. So it's coming up in everything I'm watching and seeing.
Don't you think it's the natural human reaction to assume there isn't a messy middle? I find that people will be like, oh, you look great, your house, again, not being negative to the people that are saying it, but we have this natural inclination to say, oh gosh, she's happily married, her house looks great, her kids. You should really assume that there is a messy middle, that you don't know about it. You don't need to ask about it. You're better from starting from the stance of assuming there is a messy middle, because it's highly likely that there was one. In fact, can there be something, Amy, that's joyful or good without some form of a messy middle before it?
It's funny you asked that, because I've been trying to come up with something and I can't. I like everything that I keep thinking of. There is a process to get to that point, and it's messy. Like even having a child, like,
yes, that's exactly what I was going to say. Or think about the ads last night, the dog ones that had us crying.
yeah.
You didn't take that dog out when it was a puppy. Then they showed the one that was chewing everything up. There was a messy middle, even though they love that dog and that dog was their lifelong companion. The dog does a lot of things. The baby, oh my gosh, even the messy part of the worry while being pregnant, even with the best pregnancies, there still is childbirth. There still is visits to the doctor. There's your body takes a toll. Because you think a baby is pure, right? I was going down thinking, what is something that comes into this world? Baby comes into the world pure. But there's a messy middle before it gets there.
There's
Boy, are we
9
going to
months
start?
left.
It started with this great idea with sex in the beginning, had this messy middle in between, and oh, dogs and babies.
I know. That's such a good, I cannot think of anything that is good that doesn't have work or something to get to that good.
I can't think of anything. So why do we jump to the conclusion that it just magically, that things just magically appear and they're beautiful?
That people are lucky. I like luck. Usually there's a lot of work behind luck.
Right. I mean, I had someone who told me, and I couldn't let it go. And this is what started the conversation with the ladies I run with. She said, "You're just lucky you like to get up at 5 a.m. and run." And I thought, wow, I like to get up at 5 a.m. and run. There's like 5 different layers of wrong there. There's no way I like getting up at 5 a.m.
You're right.
I like what I get out of running, the result that comes from that. I got no result where I want run. Heck no. Why?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But back to that, it was actually an aunt of mine that I love dearly. And she thought she was giving me a compliment. And I
Yeah.
held on to it all these years thinking, oh, just because I like to get up at 5 a.m. and run. Yeah. I'm one of those people.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah.
So does Trevor realize his messy middle? Was part of his excitement the graduation, or was it finishing his messy middle? As a mother, did you see something different in him that came out of that middle he came from?
Yes. Yes. He knew it was hard. Like because it was actually interesting because I asked him, I'm like, oh, so what do you think? Like, what's your overall? And he was like, it was hard, but it was fun. I'm like, okay, that was a little mixed. And so then I said, I go, so rate it 0 to 10. And he goes, 3. I was like, all right, that is a messy middle right there. And I'm like, oh, it was hard. And he was like, yeah, it was hard. Like, and then he started talking about, but he got through it. And like, one of his achievements was he maxed out his plank. And I'm like, what's that mean? He goes, Mom, I lasted as long as they were timing us. And I'm like, well, how long is that? And he was like, 3 minutes and 26 seconds.
That is a long time. Our
I
plank that we
know.
do is 125. And I mean, I am
Yeah,
looking, going, that's a long time.
I know. And I was like, wow, that is impressive. And he worked up to that and he was very proud of it, but it was hard getting there. So anyway,
That's awesome.
he's happy, but it was a hard, messy middle to get through it.
And
And
how
now
many
he
people
better
don't
spot.
go to the military because they don't want to go through basic training? The fear of
Right.
basic training. I
Yeah.
mean, it's because they know it's there, the fear of any kind of athletics. A lot of kids I know, and including a son that's going to remain unnamed, decided not to go out for sports because he didn't like all the practices.
Right. Yeah.
They weren't fun. Didn't get to play a lot in football. And, I got tackled a lot, and it just, but again, I'm not being judgmental or negative. He acknowledged the messy middle, and what he was going to get at the end wasn't worth it for him.
Right. Exactly. Which there's something to be said for that too.
Right.
Like if that is not important enough for me to go through the messy middle, then I'm going to find another path. I'm going to find something that is important enough to me to go through this. Always good things to think about. Okay, so let's talk about what's the real and what's the ideal in this.
I think we decided there's always a messy middle.
Right. I think we've already
decided
decided.
since we talked. So I don't think either one of us have come up with any kind of an example. So listeners, if you have an example of anything that has no messy middle, we'd love to hear it. But I think the real is, let's just say that almost all the time there's a messy middle.
Right. I'm going through more examples in my head and I can't come up with anything. All right. And the ideal is, I would say, continuing to acknowledge that you have to go through it to get to the end and persevere. So you just have to keep going and you'll get where you need to be or where you want to be.
And be selective in what things you want to put that energy toward, because there is a messy middle. So
Yeah.
whether you say, you know what, I want to be military, I want my writing to be published, I love this startup idea, whatever it is, commit to it and know you're committing to a messy middle to get to the end.
Right. It's not going to instantly be
You need
a
to be
$1 million
passionate.
idea.
Right.
Right. Maybe a lottery ticket. There's no messy middle to that. Maybe I
It's a
take that
messy
back.
ending.
I know. Exactly. I'm like, yeah, no, I'm continuing on.
I don't
still
know.
come up with an example.
But that's kind of like saying, so there wouldn't be a messy middle in finding $100 bill in the street. Maybe.
Maybe. Right. Like a surprise like that.
Right. So let's just say typical.
Okay. All right. So there could be some good things that happen without messy middles. We'll say that.
But acknowledging that great ideas, great enthusiasm, aspirations, be ready to do the heavy lifting in between.
Yeah.
And map it out, persevere through. But there is a messy middle. And for whatever reason, we as humans do have a hard time acknowledging that bit of a mess in the middle, although we deal with it all the time. Maybe it's
right. I think that's a good point too. For the ideal would be acknowledging it for other people also and saying, like, I know you worked hard for that. And instead of saying, oh, wow, you got lucky, acknowledging that there is a messy middle there and that they worked hard to get through that to where they are now. I think that's probably what people need, is that recognition of that.
Great, because I'll give a quick example. I had heard many a times, back to past successes, career successes. Oh, you make it look so easy, or, oh, wow, no. You got they were really good to you. Your company was really good to you. So in other words, they gave me something. It wasn't my work. I heard that a lot. And I think that was a female thing. Oh, you were really lucky. Those guys were really good to you. My mom said to me on a walk, I don't know what we were talking about. I think we were talking about nieces and nephews and going to college. And she said, you did everything on your own, Sandy. Everything you've done, you're a completely self-made woman. And I thought, I can't dispute her. I mean, because her point was, we didn't hand you, we gave you the tools to be raised in a good person, but everything you've done, the paths you've chosen on your own, and you've done on your own. And I thought, what a great, I remember that compliment, because I thought, rather than hearing over and over again, oh, you're so lucky because, you really got somebody gave you an opportunity. And again, not to say doors opened and you can't show gratitude, but the point is, when you're telling somebody, when you're giving praise, give them praise for the work that they did to get there too. Whether it is the health, the body, the home, know there is parts for it. And it's going to go a lot longer to be authentic in acknowledging the road to get there versus being dismissive in there not being a road.
Yeah. Yes. Well said. All right. Let's leave with that wisdom, because that was lovely. Thank you.
And is lovely. And next time, I can't wait to, we'll keep riding the Chiefs fun here.
Yes, we will. Okay. Until next time. Thank you for listening. Talk to you later, Sandy.
Bye, Amy.